Farlost, created by John Miro. 7. Murray floated upside down, facing backwards towards Dina. "Is he still talking about that Kenny B guy?" "It's G, smartass," Raj growled as he floated in the open airlock into the storm cellar, ignoring the crewmen taking roll call at the door. Dina and her boys were waiting behind 3 other crew for their turn to be signed into the storm cellar airlock. If it was possible to be bored while waiting for access to the only place on board where she wouldn't die in half an hour, then that's what Dina was. Raj, as usual, hadn't stopped talking since they'd hit the bottleneck. "He's a jazz legend," Raj growled as he bounced hyperactively around the airlock. "No one else comes close. And another thing, who do I have to kill for approval to test Frickin' Frack's new suit arms?" Dina rolled her eyes as Raj flipped conversations. He did that a lot. You got used to it. "What's the holdup?" the diminutive payload specialist ranted on. "More paperwork, I bet. On paper, those arms will output something like 60% greater pressure PSI, and only 3 maintenance ports now instead of 5. Murray made appropriate sounds at appropriate moments, but Dina knew he wasn't listening either. He didn't have to. They'd heard it all before. Murray caught her eye and made a little gimme gesture with his fingers. She caught on and pulled out the nicotine gum pack, tossing it all his way. The gum was halfway between them when a shadow fell over it. Someone else had arrived behind them. She turned and saw a long, pale face stretching beneath a pale, blonde buzz cut. Second Officer Devine. "Oh, shit," Dina thought. "Here we go. You know how I feel about displaying pharmaceuticals in public areas, Rodriguez." As usual, Devine talked only to her, ignoring Murray and Raj as if he might catch something by communicating directly with those too far below his station. Now Raj did shut up, as he and Murray gave the officer token nods of their heads and then quickly found other places for their eyes. "Sorry, sir," Dina replied, letting herself coast in between her boys and the pompous second-in-command. "Given we're heading into the cellar, though, there's not really much chance of privacy. Is there, sir?" Devine's lips puckered. Murray spun around to hide the grin on his face. Dina had more training dealing with the brass and hid her own humor more effectively. Second Officer Devine couldn't tell when people were taking the piss out of him. His twisting up of his lips was a tell that his brain was doing some extra processing to decide. "Next," they called out at the cellar door. Raj flipped Murray by an ankle and floated ahead of him. "Snooze you lose," he chirped over his shoulder, tearing back the Velcro strap on his forearm pocket and tugging his ID out. "Agreed, Rodriguez," Devine said. Evidently the man had decided she wasn't making trouble, and now he plowed ahead, typically heavy-handed. "However, I'm going to schedule fitness exams for your specialists. I'm not sure we want millions of dollars in the hands of nicotine addicts who might get twitchy during delicate cargo transfers." Murray's eyebrows knit together as he reached for the ceiling to pirouette around expertly. He pushed the watch cap roughly back on his head, and Dina knew he was about to give the officer a mouthful. She pushed off from her perch to float between the men, struggling to find words to cut Murray off before he said something Devine would have no trouble translating. A booming metal echo did the job for her. She knew instantly that the sound had come from outside the ship, and that something was wrong. Just a few feet away from the airlock at the top of their assigned cellar, Dina's ears told her how wrong that something was. Murray's did too. She saw him flinch and grab hold of a ceiling-mounted grip bar and look at her. There was fear in his eyes. Raj was already at the airlock, quick-witted and selfless in the moment. He'd wrapped an emergency line around one wrist and jumped back as far as the rope would take him. He whipped there in the sudden, sucking current of whistling air, reaching his free hand back for Murray. The lights flipped to red, and klaxons wailed. His words lost, Raj started screaming for them to hurry, beckoning them close with his arms. Dina flailed out for a handhold and missed. Her ears began to ache. She felt the sudden dip in pressure, felt the air currents first seem to freeze and then pull against her body. Dina realized the airlock array they were in was losing containment. Her ears were throbbing now, and the screaming voices all around were nearly drowned out by this sudden massive change in pressure. Dina winced against the pain and then against the terror when she realized she was being pulled away from the airlock. Her vision began to tunnel and her heart pounded in her chest and throat as the pressure gripping her increased. Madre de Dios! The ship was breached. She was being sucked away from the cellar. How long before a wall cracked wide enough to suck her out into space? A hand slapped her face, jerking her eyes wide open. Devine was there, his lips pursed again, and his usually pallid face red with effort. His flailing hands dug into the fabric of her collar and propelled her roughly forward. Devine had saved her. Then Murray had her, one hand pounding her back hard before his fingers grabbed a fistful of her jumpsuit. Through tearing eyes, she saw Raj holding onto Murray's other arm, reeling Murray and her inside the doors. She slammed against them and felt the vibration of their closing that she still couldn't hear. Then they were through and spinning free of the closing jaws of the airlock. "Wait!" she screamed, or tried to. She looked back and saw Devine tumble out of sight through the other side of the airlock, just before the inner door slammed shut. She automatically plugged her nose, blowing hard to save her eardrums and return her hearing. The pain in her head instantly doubled, but she could clearly make out words, not just terror, from the screams around her. Shit, holy shit, Devine's gone. She looked around, searching for familiar faces. Who else had they lost? Cold panic gripped her. Doc. Where was Doc? Then she saw the graying, buzzed-down afro, dark chocolate skin, and serious eyes of Dr. Sanders. He was floating from body to body, checking on his flock. He held a man's head and was turning it, checking for damage when he caught Dina's eyes. He smiled wide, relief changing his face. Dina knew dazed relief filled her face too. She nodded back and turned to check on her boys. They were safe, Dina thought. The ones who'd made it, she qualified, feeling a shocky tremble spread through her arms and legs. Then she realized just how wrong she was. The cellar was a safe haven. From radiation. Not whatever was shattering Six's skin and stealing their air. How much longer? Before the impacts broke through the cellar's extra shielding. Before everybody in here was dead too. Farlost. Music by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Learn more at servingworlds.com.